The night Elena Moretti's world shattered, she wasn't even given the courtesy of understanding why. One moment, she stood in her art gallery, celebrating a successful exhibition. The next, men in black suits surrounded her, their silence more terrifying than any threat. They spoke only one name, Adriano Valle, the crime lord who owned Rome's shadows, the man whose brother had been destroyed by her father's betrayal. And now, blood demanded payment, but her father had vanished, leaving only her behind. Elena would learn that in Adriano's world, debts are always collected, and some prisons wear the face of paradise. If you're ready for a story of captivity, obsession, and the dangerous line between revenge and redemption, stay until the end. Like this video and comment your city below, so I can see how far this story reaches across the world. The gallery should have been her sanctuary. White walls that caught the afternoon light just right, transforming ordinary space into something ethereal. Paintings she'd chosen herself, not the commercial pieces that paid the bills, but the raw, aching works that spoke to something deeper. Art that understood loneliness. Art that knew what it meant to build beauty from broken things. Elena Moretti moved through the exhibition space with practiced grace, her dark hair swept into a professional twist, her cream silk blouse and tailored pants, the uniform of someone who'd learned to look the part even when she didn't feel it. 28 years old, and she'd finally carved out something that was hers. Not her father's money, not her family's name, just her vision, her taste, her careful cultivation of artists who deserve to be seen. "Miss Moretti?" Her assistant, Chiara, appeared at her elbow, tablet in hand. "The courier just delivered the Sebastiani pieces. They're more stunning than the photographs suggested." Elena smiled, genuine warmth breaking through her professional composure. "Let's get them uncrated. I want them featured in the main room for Friday's opening." It was Tuesday. She had 3 days to perfect everything. 3 days until collectors and critics would flow through these doors, wine glasses in hand, judging not just the art, but her ability to curate it. 3 days to prove, again, that the Moretti Gallery wasn't just her father's investment, but her legacy. She didn't know she'd never see Friday. The afternoon passed in familiar rhythms, placement discussions, lighting adjustments, the satisfying click of heels on polished floors. Elena lost herself in the work, the way she always did, until the world narrowed to composition and color and the perfect angle of light. Sunset painted Rome in shades of amber and rose. Elena stood at the gallery's front windows, watching the city transform. The Tiber caught the dying light like molten gold. Ancient stones glowed warm. Tourists and locals alike moved through streets that had witnessed millennia of human drama, love and war, glory and ruin, the endless cycle of creation and destruction that made Rome eternal. She loved this city, had lived here all her life, yet still found herself awed by its beauty, still felt like a visitor in its presence, humbled by all that history, all that permanence. "I'm heading out," Chiara called from the back office. "Unless you need me to stay." Elena glanced at her watch. 7:30, later than she'd realized. "No, go ahead. I'll just finish the inventory and lock up." "Don't work too late." Chiara grabbed her bag, pausing at the door. "You know what they say about all work and no play?" "They say it makes you successful," Elena countered with a small smile. "They say it makes you lonely," Chiara corrected gently. Then she was gone, the door chiming softly behind her. Lonely. Elena turned back to the windows, watching her reflection ghost against the darkening glass. Was she lonely? She had her work, her artists, the quiet satisfaction of building something meaningful. That should be enough. But sometimes, in moments like this, the silence felt less like peace and more like absence. She shook off the melancholy. Self-pity was a luxury she couldn't afford. She had an inventory to complete, an exhibition to finalize. Purpose was better than company, anyway. Purpose didn't disappoint you. Elena moved to the back office, pulling up spreadsheets and invoices on her computer. Numbers grounded her. There was clarity in accounting, certainty in columns that balanced. Unlike art, unlike people, numbers didn't lie. She was cross-referencing a shipment manifest when the front door chimed. Strange. She'd locked it when Chiara left. "We're closed," Elena called out, not looking up from her screen. Probably someone who hadn't seen the hours posted. "We open again Thursday at 10. Silence answered her. The kind of silence that has weight, that presses against your skin like a physical thing, raising every instinct that evolution gave you to recognize danger. Elena looked up slowly. 3 men stood in her gallery. Not art collectors, not lost tourists. Men who wore expensive suits the way soldiers wore armor, crisp, dark, designed to intimidate. They didn't browse the paintings or admire the space. They simply stood there, utterly still, their eyes fixed on her with the cold attention of predators who'd already decided on their prey. Elena's heart kicked hard against her ribs. She stood carefully, keeping her movements deliberate, non-threatening. "I'm sorry, but we're closed for the evening. If you'd like to schedule a private..." Elena Moretti. The one in the center spoke her name like a conclusion, not a question, a statement of fact that required no confirmation. Ice crystallized in her veins. "Who are you?" "Someone who wishes to discuss a matter of business with you." His Italian carried the polished accent of old Roman money, but his eyes were dead. Professional. "You'll come with us, please." Please. The word that was really a command. "I don't know who you think I am," Elena said, proud that her voice came out steady. "But I'm not going anywhere with you. Leave now, or I'll call the police." She reached for her phone. The man on the left moved so fast she barely saw it. Suddenly he was beside her desk, his hand covering hers on the phone, his grip just painful enough to make his point without leaving marks. "That would be inadvisable, Miss Moretti." The center man's tone never changed, calm, almost bored. "Signor Val has requested your presence. It would be unfortunate if you forced us to be less courteous." Signor Val. The name hit her like a physical blow. Everyone in Rome knew that name. Everyone with any sense feared it. Adriano Val, the ghost who ran the city's underworld, the man politicians whispered about in backrooms, and journalists didn't dare investigate too closely. The crime lord who'd built an empire on violence and fear, yet moved through society's highest circles untouchable. What could Adriano Val possibly want with her? "There's been a mistake," Elena said quickly. "I run an art gallery. I don't have anything to do with whatever world you're from." "I don't know why Vela would..." "Your father," the center man interrupted softly, "is Marco Moretti." "Yes?" Elena's throat closed. "What does my father have to do with this?" "Everything, Miss Moretti, and nothing." The man gestured toward the door. "These questions are better answered elsewhere. Come willingly or come unwillingly. But you will come." Terror flooded her system, sharp and chemical, fight-or-flight responses screaming through every nerve. But she wasn't stupid. These men were professionals. If she screamed, they'd silence her. If she ran, they'd catch her. If she fought, she'd lose. And no one knew she was here. No one would miss her until Thursday morning when the gallery didn't open. "Let me lock up properly," Elena heard herself say, survival instinct taking over. "Buy time, stay calm, look for opportunities." "The alarm system has been disabled," the center man said. "Your assistant's safety deposit access code, your backup security provider, your insurance company's emergency contact, all attended to. You are very thorough in your record-keeping, Miss Moretti. It made our preparation quite efficient." They'd researched her, planned this, known exactly where she'd be and when. This wasn't random. This was a hunt that had ended the moment it began. Elena's hands trembled as she grabbed her coat and purse. She looked around this gallery one last time. Her gallery, her beautiful, carefully built sanctuary, and wondered if she'd ever see it again. The men escorted her to a black SUV parked illegally in front. Tinted windows. No plates. The kind of vehicle that belonged to people who didn't worry about traffic laws. They drove through Rome as night fell completely. Elena watched familiar streets slip past, thinking desperately. Should she try to escape at a traffic light? Scream for help? But the man beside her sat too close, and she could see the shape of a weapon beneath his jacket. Besides, where would she run? To the police? Everyone knew the police in Rome had been compromised years ago. To her father? Her father. The man had said this was about her father. Elena hadn't spoken to Marco Moretti in 6 months. Their relationship had always been complicated. Love twisted up with disappointment, affection shadowed by the sense that she'd never quite measured up to whatever he'd wanted in a daughter. He'd funded her gallery, yes, but that felt more like investment than support. A way to park money somewhere legitimate. Legitimate. Oh God, the art gallery, the account she managed. The international shipments and payments from collectors whose names she'd never questioned because she'd never had reason to. Had her father used her gallery to... No. No, he wouldn't. She kept meticulous records. Everything was legal, documented, proper. Wasn't it? The SUV left the city center, heading into the hills where Rome's wealthiest families built estates far from the noise and crowds. Higher and higher, until the city spread below them like a carpet of stars, beautiful and distant and utterly unreachable. They turned through massive iron gates that opened automatically, drove up a private road lined with cypress trees, and finally stopped before a villa that looked like it had been carved from moonlight and shadow. Classical Roman architecture rendered in pale stone, columns that reached toward the night sky, gardens visible even in darkness, sculpted with the precision of someone who controlled everything, even nature. Lights glowed in the windows, warm and welcoming in a way that made Elena's skin crawl. A palace, a fortress, a prison. The men escorted her inside without ceremony. Marble floors, soaring ceilings, art on the walls that made her gallery's collection look like amateur sketches, pieces she recognized from auction catalogs, paintings that should have been in museums. Everything here spoke of power, money, control. And then she saw him. Adriano Valle stood in what appeared to be a private library, his back to her as he studied something on a desk. Tall, broad-shouldered in a way that expensive tailoring couldn't quite civilize. Dark hair touched with early silver at the temples. When he turned to face her, Elena's breath caught despite her terror. He was beautiful the way Roman statues were beautiful, all clean lines and sharp angles, a face that could have been carved by masters. Mid-30s, perhaps? Dark eyes that assessed her with the cold precision of someone who saw people as chess pieces. No warmth, no mercy, just calculation. Miss Moretti. His voice matched his appearance, smooth, cultured, absolutely devoid of human feeling. Thank you for joining me, as if she'd had a choice. Elena lifted her chin, refusing to show how badly she was shaking. I didn't realize I'd been given an option. Something flickered in those dark eyes. Amusement, maybe, or appreciation for defiance that would ultimately mean nothing. You haven't, he agreed, but I prefer to maintain certain courtesies. Please, sit. He gestured to a chair facing the desk. When Elena didn't move, he simply waited, patient as stone. The men who'd brought her stood like shadows by the door. There was nowhere to go. No escape route, no cards to play. She sat. Adriano moved to the desk, picked up a folder and opened it with casual precision. Do you know why you're here, Miss Moretti? No. The word came out stronger than she felt. Your father stole from me. He said it so simply, a statement of fact like commenting on the weather. 47 million euros, to be precise, laundered through your gallery over the course of 18 months. You processed payments, shipped artwork, maintained accounts, all while my money disappeared into offshore networks your father controlled. The room tilted. That's impossible. I would have known. I keep perfect records. You keep the records your father's accountant provided you. Adriano pulled out a document, slid it across the desk toward her. Every invoice, every shipment manifest, every collector payment, all fabricated. The art you thought you were selling? Half of it never existed. The collectors who paid? Shell companies. Your gallery was never about art, Miss Moretti. It was about making dirty money clean. Elena stared at the document. Her signature, her accounts, her gallery's letterhead, all lies. My brother trusted your father, Adriano continued, his voice never rising, never betraying emotion. Trusted him to manage certain financial arrangements. Instead, Marco Moretti spent a year stealing systematically, then vanished 3 days ago. His accounts, empty. His properties, liquidated. His location, unknown. He left nothing behind. He paused, and for the first time something burned in those cold eyes. Something terrible. Nothing except you. Understanding crashed over Elena like a wave. I didn't know. I swear, I didn't. It doesn't matter. Adriano leaned back against the desk, studying her with that awful, calculating gaze. Your father stole from my family, destroyed my brother's reputation, made us look weak. In my world, Miss Moretti, blood answers for blood. Then kill me. The words burst out before she could stop them. Better a quick death than whatever he was planning. If you're going to make me pay for his crimes, just kill you? Adriano tilted his head slightly, considering. No, death is mercy. Death is quick. Your father would mourn you briefly, then continue his comfortable life somewhere safe and distant. That's not justice. He moved closer, and Elena fought the urge to shrink back. He stopped just at the edge of her personal space, close enough to intimidate, not close enough to threaten. Yet. You will stay here, Adriano said quietly. You will live as my guest, comfortable, safe, provided for. You will want for nothing except freedom. You will wake each day knowing your father's betrayal costs you every choice, every moment, every dream you might have had. And perhaps, eventually, he will care enough to come for you. He won't. The truth tasted bitter. My father doesn't. He won't come. Then you'll spend a very long time here, Miss Moretti. Elena surged to her feet, months of frustration and fear boiling over. This is insane. You can't just keep me prisoner because of something he did. I'm a person, not collateral. You are exactly collateral. Adriano's voice cut through her protest like a blade. You are the price of your father's choices. The consequence he left behind when he ran. And you will remain here until that debt is paid, one way or another. He turned away from her, dismissing her with the gesture. Lucia will show you to your rooms. You'll find them comfortable. Tomorrow, we'll discuss the parameters of your stay. Parameters? Elena's voice cracked. You mean my cage? Adriano glanced back over his shoulder. Call it what you like. But you should understand something, Miss Moretti. This estate is surrounded by walls and guards. Every exit is monitored. Every road is watched. You can try to run, but you won't succeed. And the punishment for attempting escape will be educational. He let that threat hang in the air for a moment. However, he continued, if you accept your situation with grace, you'll find your accommodations quite pleasant. Choose cooperation over resistance. It will make both our lives easier. A woman appeared in the doorway. Lucia, presumably. Middle-aged, stern-faced, wearing a housekeeper's uniform. She gestured for Elena to follow. Elena looked back at Adriano one more time. He'd already turned away, his attention back on the papers spread across his desk, dismissing her as easily as he'd condemned her. She followed Lucia through corridors that belonged in a museum. More art on the walls, sculptures and alcoves, everything beautiful and cold and utterly indifferent to her presence. They climbed a grand staircase to the second floor, walked down another hallway, and finally stopped at a door near the end. Your rooms, Lucia said in heavily accented English. Her first words. She opened the door and stepped aside. Elena walked into a prison that looked like paradise. A suite, not just a room. Sitting area with antique furniture and a fireplace. Bedroom visible through an archway. The bed large enough for 3 people, dressed in linens that probably cost more than a month's rent. Bathroom beyond that, all marble and gold fixtures. Windows that overlooked the gardens, the city lights glittering in the distance. Beautiful. Luxurious. Perfect. The door closed behind her with a soft click. Elena tested the handle, locked from the outside. She moved to the windows. They opened. Fresh air washed over her face, carrying the scent of jasmine and night-blooming flowers. But iron bars ran vertically across the opening, decorative, almost invisible in the darkness, but very, very real. A gilded cage. Elena sank onto the edge of the bed, the full weight of her situation finally crashing down. Her father had destroyed her, used her, left her to pay for his crimes, and now she belonged to a man who saw her only as a tool for revenge. She should cry, should scream, should break something. Instead, she sat in silence, staring at the locked door, and began to plan. Because Adriano Val had made one critical mistake. He assumed she'd be easy to break, assumed she'd accept captivity with grace, assumed that because she'd lived a quiet life of art and beauty, she'd be soft, compliant, willing to be the victim his revenge required. He didn't know that she'd spent 28 years trying to earn the love of a man who never gave it, that she'd built a successful gallery from nothing, proving herself again and again to people who expected her to fail. That beneath her careful professional exterior lived a woman who'd learned to fight in quieter, sharper ways. Adriano Valle wanted to punish her father through her suffering, but Elena Moretti had survived worse than his cold indifference. She'd survived being invisible to the man whose approval she'd craved most, and she'd be damned if she let another powerful man define her worth. The night stretched on. Elena didn't sleep. She explored every inch of her cage, memorizing exits and routings, windows and locks. She found a tablet on the nightstand, internet access, but heavily restricted, certain sites blocked. She tested the door again, still locked. At some point, exhaustion dragged her into restless sleep, still wearing her gallery clothes, still refusing to accept the comfortable prison Adriano had built for her. She woke to sunlight streaming through barred windows and the smell of coffee. A breakfast tray sat on the table in her sitting room. Fresh pastries, fruit, espresso in a delicate cup. A white rose in a crystal vase, everything beautiful and hollow. Elena ignored it. She showered in the marble bathroom, using expensive soaps that smelled like bergamot and honey, then dressed in the same clothes as yesterday. A small rebellion, but rebellion nonetheless. When Lucia appeared at 10 o'clock sharp, Elena was ready. "Signor Val requests your presence in the library," the housekeeper said. "And if I refuse?" Lucia's expression didn't change. "Then I will inform him of your refusal, and he will decide the consequence." Not worth it. Not yet. Elena needed to understand the full scope of her prison before she started testing its boundaries. She followed Lucia back through the villa. Morning light transformed the space, making everything seem even more unreal, like walking through a dream or a nightmare dressed in beautiful things. Adriano stood at the library windows, looking out over his estate. He'd changed into casual clothes, dark jeans, a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. He looked younger in daylight, more human. The illusion shattered when he turned to face her. Those eyes held no warmth at all. "You slept well?" A courtesy that meant nothing. "No." "You'll adjust." He gestured to the same chair as last night. Elena remained standing. Another small rebellion. Adriano's mouth twitched, amusement or annoyance, impossible to tell. "As you wish. I thought we should establish some ground rules for your stay." "My imprisonment." "Your stay," he repeated, ignoring her correction. "First, you will not attempt to contact anyone outside this estate. No phone calls, no emails, no messages. Your gallery has been informed you're taking an extended leave for personal reasons. Your apartment is being maintained. Your life continues elsewhere." "You can't just erase me," Elena protested. "I already have. Second, you are free to move anywhere within the estate grounds. The gardens, the pool, the gym, the library. Everything is available to you. The only restrictions are the perimeter walls and certain private areas of the house. A larger cage is still a cage." "Indeed." Adriano moved to his desk, picked up another folder. "Third, you will dine with me each evening." That surprised her. "Why?" "Because I wish it." He said it so simply, as if his wishes were the only reason required. "You'll find I'm not unreasonable, Miss Moretti. Follow these rules and your time here can be quite comfortable. Fight me, and you'll discover I can be creative in my discipline." "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise." He opened the folder, glanced at something inside. "Your father contacted you 6 months ago. What did he want?" The sudden shift in topic threw her. "What?" "6 months ago, a phone call. What did he say?" How did he know that? Had they been watching her that long? "He wanted to borrow money," Elena said carefully. "Said he had an investment opportunity. I told him no." "Why?" "Because every opportunity my father touches turns to ash." Bitterness leaked into her voice despite her attempt to stay neutral. "Because I stopped being his bank years ago." Adriano studied her with renewed interest. "You don't get along with your father." "That's not your concern." "Everything about you is my concern now." He closed the folder. "What else did he say during that call?" "Nothing important. Just—" Elena hesitated, then decided honesty might serve her better than evasion. "He said he was proud of me. that the gallery was doing well. It was strange because he'd never... She cut herself off. Never what? Never cared before. The words tasted like old wounds. My father isn't a sentimental man, Signor Vale. Whatever he said, whatever he claimed, it was manipulation. That's all he knows. Something shifted in Adriano's expression. So brief she almost missed it. Understanding, maybe. Or recognition. You really didn't know, he said quietly. Not a question. A realization. About the money laundering? No. About my father being a criminal? I suspected. But I thought... Elena laughed bitterly. I thought if I just kept my head down, ran my business honestly, it wouldn't touch me. I was naive. You were trusting. Adriano's tone had changed. Still cold, but with a different quality. Almost thoughtful. There's a difference. Is there? Elena met his gaze directly. Because from where I'm standing, they both got me locked in your guest room. Adriano smiled. Actually smiled. It transformed his face completely, made him look dangerous in an entirely different way. Fair point. He moved past her toward the door. Lucia will show you the grounds. Learn them. This is your home now, Miss Moretti. You might as well understand its boundaries. And how long am I supposed to live in this home? Elena called after him. Days? Weeks? Years? Adriano paused in the doorway, glanced back. Until your father surfaces, or until I decide you've suffered enough to balance the scales. Whichever comes first. And if neither ever happens? His smile had faded, leaving only cold calculation. Then I suppose you'll die here. Eventually. He left. Elena stood alone in the library, surrounded by books worth fortunes and art worth more, and felt the full weight of her new reality settle over her shoulders. She was a possession now, a tool for revenge, a living monument to her father's sins. And Adriano Valle held every key to every door that might lead to freedom. But as she stood there, rage slowly burning through the fear, Elena made herself a promise. She would not break, would not become the broken thing his revenge required, would not give him the satisfaction of seeing her spirit crushed under the weight of his cold justice. If Adriano Valle wanted to keep her prisoner, fine, but he was about to discover that some cages worked both ways. And Elena Moretti knew how to survive powerful men who underestimated her. She'd been doing it her whole life. The gardens became her first rebellion. Lucia showed Elena the grounds that afternoon with the efficient detachment of a museum docent presenting exhibits. Here, the rose garden imported from France. There, the reflecting pool designed by some award-winning architect whose name Elena forgot immediately. Beyond, the tennis courts and pool house and sculpture garden filled with pieces that belonged in galleries, not private collections. Everything beautiful, everything controlled, everything designed to showcase power. The perimeter wall, Lucia said, gesturing toward the edge of the property where ancient stones rose 15 feet high, is monitored. Do not approach it. Or what? Elena asked. Lucia's expression remained neutral. Signor Valle dislikes having his instructions questioned. Signor Valle can dislike whatever he wants. I asked a simple question. The housekeeper studied her for a long moment. The guards are instructed to escort you back to your rooms, forcibly, if necessary. It would be undignified. Undignified. As if dignity still mattered when you were a prisoner. But Elena filed the information away. Guards meant she'd been right. This wasn't just about locked doors and barred windows. Adriano had built a fortress, and she was trapped at its center. That night, dinner proved exactly as uncomfortable as she'd anticipated. A formal dining room that could seat 20. Crystal chandeliers casting soft light over a table set for two. Adriano at one end, Elena at the other, with what felt like miles of polished wood between them. He'd changed into a dark suit, perfectly tailored, making him look every inch the powerful man he was. Elena had deliberately worn jeans and a simple black sweater, clothes she'd found in the wardrobe that had appeared in her room, filled with items in exactly her size. She refused to think about how he'd known, what it meant that he'd prepared for her captivity so thoroughly. You didn't touch your breakfast, Adriano observed as servers brought out the first course. Or lunch. I wasn't hungry. A lie. She was starving, but accepting his food felt like accepting her situation. Starving yourself won't hurt me, Miss Moretti. Only you. Then I suppose that's my choice to make. Adriano's lips curved slightly. Is it? I could have you fed intravenously if necessary. Would you prefer that? Elena's hands clenched in her lap. He would too. She could see it in his eyes, that absolute certainty that his will would be done, one way or another. She picked up her fork. Better, Adriano said softly. They ate in silence for several minutes. The food was extraordinary. Flavors that exploded on her tongue. Textures that should have been impossible. Whoever cooked here was an artist. Tell me about your gallery, Adriano said suddenly. Elena looked up, surprised. Why? Because I'm curious. You built it yourself, yes? Your father provided initial capital, but the vision was yours. Are you trying to make conversation? Disbelief colored her voice. As if this is a normal dinner between normal people? Would you prefer silence? I'd prefer freedom. That's not on offer. Adriano leaned back in his chair, wineglass in hand, watching her with that unnerving intensity. But conversation is. I find you interesting, Miss Moretti. That surprises me. Because you expected me to be what? A pampered princess? A criminal's daughter who knew exactly what her father was? Yes, he admitted. Instead, you're a woman who built something legitimate in a world defined by her father's corruption. That takes either courage or denial. I'm curious which. Elena set down her fork carefully. You want to know me? Fine. I spent my entire childhood trying to earn my father's attention. Straight A's in school, he didn't notice. Art competitions won. He sent his assistant to the ceremonies. I chose business school over art school because I thought it would make him proud. It didn't. So eventually, I stopped trying to be what he wanted and started building what I wanted. The gallery isn't about him. It never was. It was about proving I could create something that mattered, something beautiful, something mine. She paused, anger threading through her voice. And then I discovered it was never mine at all, just another tool he used, another lie in a life built on them. So yes, Signor Vell, I'm bitter, angry, and absolutely not interested in being your entertainment while you wait for my father to surface. Adriano absorbed this quietly, his expression unreadable. You have his eyes, he said finally. Your father's, but not his soul, I think. You don't know anything about my soul. Don't I? He leaned forward slightly. You're furious with him, hurt by him. Yet part of you still wants him to come for you, to prove that you matter enough to risk himself. That's why you're fighting so hard. Not because you think you'll escape, but because you need to believe you're worth fighting for. The observation cut deeper than any threat could have. Elena felt her breath catch, felt the truth of it sliding under her skin like a blade. You're wrong, she whispered. I'm rarely wrong about people, Miss Moretti. It's how I've survived this long. Elena stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I'm done. With dinner and with this conversation. Sit down. The command carried absolute authority. Elena's body responded before her mind could protest, muscle memory from a lifetime of obeying powerful men overriding her will. Then she caught herself, forced herself to remain standing. No, she said clearly, you can lock me in your house, monitor my movements, control every aspect of my life, but you can't force me to sit at your table and pretend this is civilized. We both know what this is. Don't insult my intelligence by pretending otherwise. Adriano watched her with those dark, calculating eyes. For a moment, Elena thought he'd follow through on his earlier threats. Force her compliance. Demonstrate his power in ways that would leave no doubt about who controlled this situation. Instead, he nodded once. Very well. You may go. The dismissal shocked her more than a threat would have. Elena stood frozen, uncertain whether this was a test or a genuine concession. I said you may go, Miss Moretti. Adriano's attention returned to his meal, as if she'd already ceased to exist. Though I suggest you eat something before you retire. Pride is a poor substitute for sustenance. Elena fled. The days that followed established a pattern. Mornings, she explored the estate, learning every path and garden, every outbuilding and shadowed corner. Not because she enjoyed it, but because knowledge was power. Understanding the scope of her cage meant understanding how to escape it. The guards watched her constantly, professional, distant. never speaking, but always present. She tested their boundaries carefully, approaching the wall in different locations, trying the locked doors of certain buildings, wandering toward the front gate. Each time they appeared like shadows, silently redirecting her, like shepherding a particularly stubborn sheep. Afternoons, she claimed the library as her territory. Adriano rarely used it during daylight hours, and Elena found herself drawn to the books. First editions, rare manuscripts, collections that spoke to a mind far more complex than the cold crime lord she'd met. Philosophy, art history, poetry in 3 languages, military strategy and economic theory side by side with novels that explored the human condition in all its messy complexity. She pulled a book at random one day, Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, and found notes in the margins. Adriano's handwriting, she realized, elegant but forceful, his thoughts captured in sharp observations about power and mortality, duty and desire. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way, one passage read. Adriano had underlined it twice, written in the margin, or an excuse for cruelty, stoicism weaponized. Elena traced the words with her finger. Was he questioning himself? Justifying his choices? Both? Find something interesting? His voice came from the doorway. Elena nearly dropped the book. She hadn't heard him enter. I thought you were in the city. I was. Now I'm here. Adriano moved into the library with that controlled grace he carried everywhere. You're reading my notes. It wasn't a question, so Elena didn't answer. She closed the book, slid it back onto the shelf. Keep it, if you like, Adriano said. I've read it a dozen times. Once more won't change anything. Why do you read philosophy? The question escaped before she could stop it. Men like you don't usually... Men like me? His eyebrow raised. What exactly are men like me, Miss Moretti? Brutal, powerful, more concerned with control than contemplation. Perhaps I'm brutal and contemplative. Adriano selected a book from a different shelf, Machiavelli, and held it up. The prince argues that power requires ruthlessness, that mercy is weakness. Do you think I believe that? I think you keep me prisoner to punish my father through my suffering. So, yes, I think you believe it. I keep you prisoner because blood demands blood, because in my world debts must be paid, because to do otherwise would mark me as weak, and weak men in my position don't survive long. He replaced the book carefully. But that doesn't mean I enjoy it. Elena laughed bitterly. Oh, well then, I'll sleep better knowing my captor has a conscience. I never claimed to have a conscience, Miss Moretti. I claim to be contemplative. There's a difference. Adriano moved closer, and Elena fought the urge to step back. Contemplation means understanding the cost of your choices. Conscience means caring about that cost. I know exactly what keeping you here does to you. I simply value my family's honor more than your freedom. Honest, at least. I find dishonesty inefficient. He studied her face for a moment. You're losing weight. Lucia says you barely eat. Lucia talks too much. Lucia follows orders, as will you, one way or another. Adriano's tone shifted, became dangerously soft. Eat properly, Miss Moretti, or I'll have a doctor brought in to ensure you do. Your choice. Everything here is my choice, apparently, as long as I choose what you want. Now you're learning. He turned to leave, paused at the door. Dinner, 7 o'clock. Don't make me send someone to collect you. He left before she could respond. Elena sank into one of the library chairs, hands shaking with suppressed rage. Every conversation with him left her feeling stripped raw, exposed. He saw too much, understood too much, used her own thoughts against her with surgical precision. And the worst part? She was starting to understand him too. The man who read Marcus Aurelius and questioned stoicism. Who built an empire on violence but surrounded himself with beauty. Who held her prisoner yet seemed almost reluctant about it. Almost. Not enough to free her. Never enough for that. That evening, Elena appeared for dinner exactly on time. She'd learned that small rebellions only cost her energy without gaining ground. Better to choose her battles. Adriano noticed immediately. You're prompt. I'm practical. Elena took her seat, accepted wine from the server. Fighting you on everything is exhausting. I'd rather save my strength for things that matter. Dinner doesn't matter? Dinner is theater. You performing civility, me performing compliance. We both know it's a lie. Something like respect flickered in his eyes. You're smarter than I gave you credit for. Most people underestimate me. It's usually their mistake, not mine. They ate in silence for a while. The meal was simpler tonight, pasta with a sauce that tasted like summer itself, bright and fresh and alive. Elena ate properly, not because he'd ordered it, but because she'd realized he was right. Starving herself only gave him more power. Tell me about your brother, Elena said suddenly. The one my father hurt. Adriano's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. He set it down carefully. Why? Because you're punishing me for crimes against him. I should at least know who I'm suffering for. For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he leaned back, wine glass in hand, and something in his expression shifted, became almost human. Dante, Adriano said quietly. 3 years younger than me. Smart. Charming. The kind of person who made you believe everything would work out, even when it wouldn't. Our father groomed me to take over the family business. Dante was supposed to handle the legitimate side. Investments, real estate, money management. What happened? Your father happened. Adriano's voice hardened. Marco Moretti convinced Dante he could triple our legitimate holdings through strategic offshore investments. Showed him numbers that looked perfect. Projections that promised everything. Dante trusted him, brought him into the family's confidence, gave him access to accounts worth hundreds of millions. He paused, swirling wine in his glass. When the theft was discovered, Dante was blamed. Our associates thought he was either incompetent or complicit. His reputation shattered. Men he'd worked with for years stopped returning calls. Deals collapsed. Everything he'd built, gone. Because he trusted the wrong man. Elena felt sick. Where is he now? Rebuilding, slowly, painfully, learning to trust again. Adriano met her eyes directly. Your father didn't just steal money, Miss Moretti. He stole my brother's future, his confidence, his place in our world. That's why you're here. Because some debts can't be paid in currency. I'm not my father, Elena whispered. No, Adriano agreed. But you're all I have of him, and in my world, that's enough. The weight of it pressed down on her. The unfairness. The absolute impossibility of ever balancing scales that had nothing to do with her actions and everything to do with her blood. I had a brother too, Elena heard herself say. Andrea. He was younger, funny, kind. Everything my father wasn't. She stared at her wine glass, seeing memories in the dark red liquid. He died when I was 17. Car accident. My father was driving. He survived. Andrea didn't. Adriano waited, silent. After that, my father changed, became harder, more distant. Like he'd left his humanity in that car with Andrea's body. Elena's throat tightened. Sometimes I think he resents me for surviving when the son he actually loved didn't. Maybe that's why he found it so easy to use me. I was never really his daughter, just a placeholder for the child he lost. That's not your fault, isn't it? Isn't that exactly what you're doing to me? Punishing me for existing in proximity to someone else's sins? Adriano set down his wine glass with careful precision. Yes, he said, finally. It is. The difference is, I'm honest about it. Your father pretended to love you while using you. I make no such pretense. How comforting. I never offered you comfort, Miss Moretti. Only certainty. They finished the meal in heavy silence. When Elena rose to leave, Adriano spoke again. Your gallery, the artists you represented, they were talented? The question surprised her. Yes, very. Most of them were unknowns who deserved recognition. I'd like to see their work. If you're willing to show me. Elena turned, studying him, looking for the angle, the manipulation. Why? Because I'm curious about what you found beautiful enough to risk your father's money supporting. It wasn't his money. It was... She stopped, laughed bitterly. It was his money, all of it, even the pieces I thought I earned myself. Show me anyway, Adriano said. Tomorrow, the library. Bring whatever you can access digitally. It wasn't a request, but it wasn't quite a command either, something in between. an invitation wrapped in expectation. Fine, Elena said, but only because I want you to see what he destroyed, what you're complicit in destroying by keeping me here. If the barb struck home, Adriano didn't show it. He simply nodded, dismissing her with a gesture that had probably cowed countless men. Elena refused to be cowed. She left with her head high, dignity intact, even if her freedom wasn't. The next afternoon, Elena brought her tablet to the library. She'd spent the morning accessing her gallery's cloud storage. Adriano's restrictions on internet access apparently didn't extend to her own professional accounts, and downloading images of the exhibitions she'd curated. Adriano arrived exactly on time. He'd abandoned the formal suit for dark slacks and a cashmere sweater that made him look less like a crime lord and more like a professor. The illusion lasted exactly until you met his eyes. "Show me," he said simply. Elena opened the first file. This was my inaugural exhibition. 5 artists, all under 30, all working in mixed media. This piece is by Valentina Rossi. She layers photography with oil paint, creating these dreamlike narratives about memory and loss. She swiped through images, narrating each one. The early exhibitions that established her reputation, the risks she'd taken on untested artists, the moments when everything had clicked, when she'd known she'd found something special. Adriano listened without interruption, studying each image with genuine attention. When she paused, he asked questions. Technical questions about process and pricing, composition, and cultural context. Questions that revealed a sophisticated understanding of art. "You know this world," Elena said, surprised despite herself. "My mother was a painter. Before she married my father, before she became a crime lord's wife, she had dreams of exhibitions and galleries." Adriano's expression remained neutral, but something shifted in his voice. She gave it up. For family, for duty, for all the reasons women of her generation gave up their dreams. Does she still paint? She died when I was 20, cancer. By then, she hadn't touched a brush in 15 years. He gestured to the tablet. "Continue." Elena showed him more. The contemporary pieces that pushed boundaries, the classical works that honored tradition, the abstract expressions of rage and beauty that spoke to something she couldn't name but always recognized. "This one," Adriano said, stopping her on an image. A painting of a woman standing at a window, her back to the viewer, city lights beyond the glass. "Tell me about this." Giovanna Bianchi. She painted it after her husband left her. Said it was about the moment you realize you're alone but not lonely. That solitude and isolation aren't the same thing. "You bought this one for yourself." It wasn't a question. Elena nodded slowly. "How did you know?" "Because you look at it differently than the others. This one matters personally." He wasn't wrong. Elena had hung that painting in her apartment, had stood in front of it countless nights, understanding exactly what the artist meant. The freedom of solitude. The peace of being alone without being abandoned. "I thought I understood it," Elena said quietly. "Before. Now I realize I didn't know anything about isolation. Not really. Not until I came here." Adriano studied this painting for a long moment. "I'll buy it from you. Name your price." "It's not for sale." "Everything is for sale, Miss Moretti. Not to you. Not this." Elena closed the tablet, breaking the spell. "You can't have everything you want, Signor Valle, no matter how much power you have." "Can't I?" But he didn't push, simply nodded, accepting the boundary. "The other pieces, the artists you represented, what happened to them when you disappeared?" "I don't know." The words hurt. "I assume they found other galleries, other representation. They're talented enough to succeed without me." "You miss it." "Of course I miss it. It was my life, my purpose, my proof that I was more than Marco Moretti's disappointing daughter." Elena stood, needing distance. "You asked to see what I found beautiful. Now you have. Was it worth it? Does understanding what you destroyed make you feel better about destroying it?" Adriano stood as well, closing the distance she'd tried to create. "I didn't destroy your gallery, Miss Moretti. Your father did. I'm simply holding you accountable for his choices." "That's a convenient fiction? You sleep better at night telling yourself that?" "I sleep perfectly well." He moved closer still, and Elena found herself backed against the bookshelf, nowhere to go. "You want me to be the villain in your story, the monster who stole your freedom for no reason. But the truth is more complicated. Your father hurt my family. You are his family. Therefore, you pay the price. It's mathematics, not malice. Mathematics, Elena laughed, sharp and bitter. Is that what you tell yourself when you lock me in at night? When you post guards to watch my every move? When you force me to perform civility at your dinner table? Mathematics? Yes. His voice dropped, became dangerously soft. Because if I allowed myself to see you as anything other than an equation to be balanced, I'd have to acknowledge that you're innocent. And if you're innocent, then what I'm doing is cruel. And I can't afford to be cruel without purpose, Miss Moretti. Cruelty without purpose is evil. I'm many things, but I'm not evil. You're splitting hairs to protect your conscience. I told you, I don't have a conscience. But his eyes said otherwise. For just a moment, Elena saw conflict there. Doubt. The weight of choices that cost more than he'd expected. Then it was gone. Walls slamming back into place. The crime lord returning, the conflicted man disappearing. Our session is over, Adriano said, stepping back, creating distance. Thank you for sharing your work. He left before she could respond. Left her standing alone in his library, surrounded by his books and her memories, wondering which of them was really the prisoner. The days blurred together. A week became 2. 2 became a month. Elena marked time by small changes, flowers blooming in the garden, books finished in the library, the guard rotation she'd memorized completely, and the dinners. Every evening, 7 o'clock, the same ritual. At first they'd fought, sharp words and sharper silences, each testing the other's boundaries. But slowly, imperceptibly, something shifted. They began to talk, really talk, about art and philosophy, history, and human nature. Adriano shared pieces of himself he'd probably shared with no one. Elena found herself revealing truths she'd never spoken aloud. She learned he'd studied economics at university before his father's death forced him into the family business. That he hated opera but loved jazz. That he spoke 5 languages fluently and read poetry in all of them. He learned she'd wanted to be an artist before pragmatism crushed the dream. That she preferred autumn to spring, solitude to crowds. That she'd never been in love because love required trust, and trust required vulnerability she'd learned early not to risk. Everyone talks about love like it's transcendent, Elena said one night over dessert, like it elevates you, makes you better. But all I've ever seen is love making people smaller. My mother loved my father. It destroyed her. She spent 30 years trying to be enough for a man who was never satisfied. When she died, I think part of her was relieved. Love doesn't have to diminish, Adriano countered. My parents, despite everything, had something real. They challenged each other, made each other stronger. Until your mother gave up painting. She chose family over art. That doesn't mean the family diminished her. Doesn't it? Elena met his eyes across the table. If the price of love is sacrificing the thing that defines you, then love is just another prison. Maybe prettier than this one, but still a cage. Adriano was quiet for a moment. Is that what you think this is? A relationship? The question caught her off guard. No, of course not. This is captivity. I'm your prisoner. Are you? He leaned back, studying her. You eat with me willingly now. Spend your afternoons in my library reading my books. Yesterday, I saw you laughing with one of the gardeners. You've stopped trying the doors, stopped testing the perimeter. For a prisoner, you've become remarkably comfortable. Elena's hands clenched under the table. Because he was right. She had become comfortable. Had started to accept this new reality. Had begun to forget, in small dangerous ways, that this wasn't her life, just an intermission in it. I'm adapting, she said carefully. Survival instinct. It doesn't mean I want to be here. No, Adriano agreed, but it means you're not fighting anymore. Why? Because fighting you is exhausting and pointless. You hold all the power. The only choice I have is whether to suffer loudly or quietly. I chose quietly. Or you chose to stop seeing this as suffering. The observation landed like a blow. Elena stood abruptly. I'd like to be excused. Sit down, Elena. He'd never used her first name before. Always Miss Moretti. Always maintaining that formal distance. Hearing her name in his voice did something strange to her pulse. "Sit," he repeated, softer this time. "Please." Elena sat, hated herself for sitting, for responding to the request in his voice like it mattered. "I'm not trying to hurt you," Adriano said. "I'm trying to understand you." "Why? So you can manipulate me better?" "Because you interest me." He said it simply, like a fact. "I've kept people captive before. Usually they break or harden, become either defeated or defiant. You're neither. You adapt without surrendering. Remain yourself while accepting your circumstances. That's rare." "Lucky me. I intrigue my captor. Mock if you like, but yes, you intrigue me." Adriano stood, moved to the windows overlooking the garden. "When this started, you were a tool for revenge, a way to hurt your father through his daughter, but he hasn't surfaced, hasn't tried to contact you or negotiate for your release. And I'm left with the uncomfortable reality that I'm keeping an innocent woman prisoner for a crime she didn't commit against a family member my brother has already forgiven." Elena's breath caught. "What?" "Dante called me last week, asked me to let you go, said the revenge wasn't worth the cost to my soul." Adriano's reflection in the glass looked almost vulnerable. "He's always been softer than me, more forgiving. It's his weakness and his strength." "Then let me go." "Sis." Hope surged, sharp and painful. "If he's forgiven my father, if the debt is settled, it's not that simple." Adriano turned to face her. "In my world, showing mercy is showing weakness. If I release you without your father paying the price, every enemy I have will know I'm soft. They'll test me, push boundaries, try to take what I've built. I can't afford that. So I'm still a prisoner, still paying for sins that aren't mine because you're afraid to look weak." "Yes," he said flatly. "Your freedom isn't worth the chaos it would cause. I'm sorry, but that's the truth." Elena felt something break inside her, some last fragile hope she'd been protecting without realizing it. "You're not sorry. You don't know how to be sorry. You're wrong." Adriano crossed the room, stopped just in front of her, close enough that she could see the conflict in his eyes, the war between what he wanted and what he believed he had to do. "I'm sorrier than you know, but sorrow doesn't change necessity." "Necessity," Elena laughed, the sound broken. "You hide behind that word like it absolves you. It doesn't. You're making a choice, Adriano. Every day you choose to keep me here. Own that choice. Don't pretend it's inevitable." He flinched, actually flinched at her words. "You're right," he said quietly. "This is my choice. My decision to value my position over your freedom. My choice to be the kind of man who holds innocent women prisoner." He reached out, almost touched her face, then pulled back. "I never claimed to be good, Elena. Only powerful. There's a difference." She stood, needing to escape before the tears came, before she shattered in front of him and gave him even more power over her. "I'd like to go to my room now." "Of course." Adriano stepped back, creating space. "I'll have Lucia escort you. I know the way." Nevertheless, always in control, always maintaining his authority. Even when doubt flickered in his eyes, even when guilt seemed to crack his certainty, he never truly yielded. Elena left the dining room, feeling Lucia fall into step behind her, walked through corridors she'd memorized, climbed stairs she'd learned to navigate in darkness, entered the beautiful prison that had somehow become familiar. The door clicked shut behind her, locked, as always. Elena moved to the window, pressed her forehead against the cool glass, and finally let the tears fall. Because Adriano was right. She had stopped fighting, had let comfort seduce her into forgetting this was captivity, had started to see her jailer as something other than an enemy, and that terrified her more than any threat he could have made. Outside, the gardens glowed in moonlight, beautiful and distant and utterly unreachable, just like the life she'd left behind, just like the freedom she'd once taken for granted. Elena stood there for a long time, watching night deepen over the estate, and wondered how much longer she could survive in a cage that had started to feel like home. The change came slowly, like winter turning to spring, so gradual that Elena didn't notice until she was already transformed. It started the morning she woke and realized she'd stopped counting days, stopped marking time on an invisible calendar in her mind, waiting for rescue that would never come. The realization settled over her like frost, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. She found Adriano in the library that afternoon. He looked up from his reading, surprise flickering across his features. She rarely sought him out. Their interactions had always been on his terms, his schedule, his carefully maintained control. "I want to paint," Elena said without preamble. Adriano closed his book, giving her his full attention. "Paint? You said your mother was a painter. That means somewhere in this house there are supplies. I want access to them." She lifted her chin defiant. "Unless that's forbidden too." "Nothing is forbidden that doesn't threaten security." He studied her face for a long moment. "Why now? You've been here 2 months without asking for anything." "Because I'm tired of being nothing, of doing nothing, of existing in this beautiful cage like a museum piece gathering dust." Elena moved closer, desperation bleeding into her voice despite her attempt to stay composed. "You want me to pay my father's debt? Fine. I'll pay it, but I won't disappear while I do. I won't let him take my identity along with everything else." Something shifted in Adriano's expression. Understanding, perhaps, or recognition of a kindred spirit fighting against erasure. "The sunroom," he said finally. "East wing, 2nd floor. My mother's studio. Nothing's been touched since she died. Use whatever you find there." Elena's breath caught. "Why?" "Because you're right. You shouldn't disappear." He returned his attention to his book, dismissing her. "The light's best in the afternoon. Don't waste it." She found the studio exactly where he'd said. A wide room with floor-to-ceiling windows facing the gardens, northern light pouring through glass like liquid gold. Canvases stacked against walls, easels draped in cloth. Paints and brushes and supplies arranged with a care that spoke to someone who'd loved them deeply. Everything covered in a decade's worth of dust. Elena spent that afternoon cleaning, wiping down surfaces, organizing supplies, opening windows to let fresh air chase away the staleness of abandonment. She found paintings too, half-finished works that showed real talent. A woman at a market, children playing in a fountain. Rome's streets captured in impressionistic strokes that felt alive, all abandoned, all unfinished, all testament to dreams deferred until they died completely. "She was good," Elena said that evening at dinner. "Your mother, really good." Adriano's hand tightened slightly on his wine glass. "Yes. The painting of the market, the way she captured light on the vegetables, the energy of the crowd, that takes skill most professionals never develop. She studied in Florence before she met my father." His voice carried carefully controlled emotion. "She always said she'd return to it. After Dante and I were grown, after the family business stabilized, always after. But after never came." "No." Adriano met her eyes across the table. "After never does, that's what I'm learning." Elena absorbed this quietly. She'd expected him to be angry about her using his mother's studio. Instead, he seemed almost grateful, as if she'd given something back to him by breathing life into that abandoned space. "I started something today," she said carefully. "Just sketches. Nothing complete. But it felt—" She paused, searching for words. "It felt like remembering how to breathe." "Then keep breathing." Adriano's tone softened. "The studio is yours. Use it however you need." "Thank you." The words felt strange in her mouth. Gratitude toward her captor. Appreciation for a gift that shouldn't feel like a gift because she shouldn't be here at all. But she was here, and denying that reality served no one. The painting consumed her. Elena woke early each morning, desperate to catch the light. She worked through afternoons until her hands cramped and her eyes burned. Lost herself in color and composition, in the physical act of creation that demanded everything and gave back something she'd forgotten she needed. Purpose. She painted the gardens first, the rose bushes and reflecting pool, the ancient cypress trees standing sentinel against Roman skies. Then the estate itself, stone and shadow, power-made architecture. She painted what she saw through the windows, the world beyond her reach made tangible through art. And slowly, almost without realizing it, she began painting her prison from the inside out. The bars on her window transformed into harsh vertical lines cutting across canvas. Her locked door became a study in perspective and imprisonment. The beautiful prison that held her took shape in oils and acrylics, each piece a meditation on captivity dressed in luxury. Adriano found her in the studio late one afternoon, paint streaked across her hands and face, standing before a canvas that showed the library from her perspective, books offering knowledge and escape, but shelves that resembled cage bars. He studied the painting in silence for several minutes. "You see my home as a prison," he said finally. "It is a prison." Elena didn't turn around, didn't stop working. "Beautiful doesn't change that." "No," he agreed. "It doesn't. But you're making beautiful things inside it. That interests me." "Why?" "Because I'm performing my captivity aesthetically. Because you're transforming pain into art instead of letting it destroy you." Adriano moved closer, examining her work with genuine attention. "Most people would have broken by now, become bitter and small. You're creating, growing, becoming more yourself instead of less." Elena set down her brush, finally facing him. "Is that what you wanted? For me to thrive in captivity like some exotic bird in a gilded cage?" "I don't know what I wanted anymore." The admission seemed to cost him. "This wasn't supposed to be complicated. You were supposed to be a tool for revenge, a message to your father. Simple, clean, mathematical." "But I'm not simple." "No, you're absolutely not simple." He reached out, almost touched the paint on her cheek, then stopped himself. "You should clean up. Dinner in an hour." He left quickly, as if staying longer might lead to something neither of them were ready to name. Elena stood alone in the studio, her heart racing for reasons that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with the way Adriano had looked at her, not as a prisoner or a tool, but as a woman creating something beautiful from broken circumstances. That night at dinner, the tension between them had changed, become charged with something electric and dangerous. They spoke of small things, the weather, a book Adriano was reading, Elena's progress in the studio, but underneath ran a current neither acknowledged. "I'm going to Rome tomorrow," Adriano said over dessert. "Business meetings. I'll be gone most of the day." Elena nodded, keeping her expression neutral even as her mind raced. A full day. The estate less heavily monitored with Adriano absent. Perhaps an opportunity. "Don't," Adriano said softly. She looked up, startled. "Don't what?" "Whatever you're planning. I can see it in your eyes. You're thinking about escape." He leaned forward slightly. "The security doesn't change when I'm gone, Elena. The guards are just as vigilant. The wall's just as high. All you'll accomplish is forcing me to restrict your movements more severely. Is that what you want?" "I want freedom." "That's not on offer, but the studio is, the gardens are, the library, a life. Even if it's not the one you chose, don't throw that away for a failed escape attempt. A life I didn't choose isn't a life, it's just existence." "Then exist beautifully," Adriano countered. "It's better than existing miserably, and it's all you're going to get." The casual cruelty of it struck her like a physical blow. Not because he was wrong, but because he was absolutely right. This was her reality. Fighting it changed nothing except her own quality of life. "I hate you," Elena whispered. "I know." Adriano's expression held something that might have been regret. "I hate what this has made me too, but neither of us can change it." She fled to her room, unable to bear another moment of his proximity, his truth, his awful certainty that this was simply how things had to be. But she didn't sleep, couldn't silence the voice in her head asking dangerous questions. What if she stopped fighting? What if she accepted this? What if the life Adriano offered, limited though it was, became enough? The thought terrified her more than any threat he could make, because somewhere between captivity and creation, between their nightly dinners and afternoon encounters in the library, between his careful distance and her desperate need for human connection, something had shifted. She was starting to see him, not as her captor, but as a man, complex and contradictory, brutal and contemplative, powerful and somehow vulnerable in ways he'd never admit, and that was more dangerous than any prison he could build. Morning came too early. Elena heard the SUVs depart just after dawn, Adriano heading to Rome with his entourage, leaving her alone in the vast estate with only guards and staff for company. She worked in the studio until noon, then wandered the gardens. The roses were in full bloom now,
their fragrance almost overwhelming in the afternoon heat.
She found herself at the reflecting pool, staring at her distorted image in the water. Who was she becoming? The woman who fought for freedom? Or the woman who'd learned to find beauty in captivity? Elena didn't know anymore. The lines had blurred so completely she could barely see where one ended and the other began. Miss Elena? One of the gardeners approached carefully. Older man, gentle eyes, had always been kind to her. You should come inside. Storm coming. She looked up, surprised. The sky had darkened while she'd been lost in thought, clouds rolling in fast, bruised purple and gray, carrying the promise of violence. Elena let herself be shepherded inside just as the first drops fell. Within minutes, the storm broke completely. Rain lashing against windows, wind howling through the gardens, thunder shaking the ancient stones. She retreated to the library, drawn by some instinct to Adriano's books, his notes, his thoughts captured in margins. Found herself reading his copy of The Count of Monte Cristo, absorbing his annotations about revenge and justice, redemption and transformation. Revenge is a dish best served cold, one passage read. Adriano had written beside it, but what happens when the serving lasts so long it loses all flavor, when revenge becomes routine instead of righteous? Elena traced the words with shaking fingers. He was questioning himself, had been questioning himself, probably for weeks now. These weren't fresh notes. The ink had faded slightly, suggesting they'd been written before she arrived, or perhaps early in her captivity, when he'd still believed this was simple. She was still reading when she heard the commotion, raised voices from somewhere below, running footsteps. Something wrong. Elena moved to the library door, opened it carefully. Could hear Lucia speaking rapidly in Italian, her usually calm voice sharp with urgency. Other voices responding. The word hospital cutting through the chaos. Fear spiked through her. Lucia. The housekeeper appeared at the base of the stairs, face pale. Miss Elena, you should go to your room. What happened? Is someone hurt? Signor Valle, there was an accident in the city. His car. Lucia's voice broke. They've taken him to hospital. Very serious. The world tilted. Elena gripped the railing to steady herself. How serious? I don't know. They wouldn't tell me. But Lucia's composure cracked completely. He's been with this family since I was a girl. If something happens... Elena descended the stairs without conscious thought, moved to Lucia, took her hands. Which hospital? You can't go. The guards have orders. Which hospital, Lucia? The housekeeper stared at her for a long moment. Then, so quietly, Elena almost missed it. Santo Spirito. But Miss Elena, they won't let you leave. Your presence there could cause complications, questions. Of course. Because she was a prisoner. Because her existence in Adriano's life was a secret. Because even now, even in crisis, the constraints of her captivity held firm. Elena returned to the library in a daze, stood at the windows watching the storm rage, feeling something crack inside her chest. Adriano could be dying. The man who held her prisoner. The man she'd learned to talk to, argue with, exist alongside. The man whose notes she read, whose mother's studio she'd claimed, whose complex nature had begun to fascinate her against all reason. And she couldn't go to him. Couldn't even know if he lived or died except through secondhand reports from staff who had more right to his life than she did. The unfairness of it, not her captivity now, but her powerlessness in this moment, shattered something she'd been protecting. She cared. Despite everything, despite reason, despite the fundamental wrongness of their entire relationship, she cared whether Adriano Val lived or died. And caring made her the most imprisoned she'd ever been. Hours passed. The storm continued its assault. Elena paced the library like a caged animal, desperate for information, receiving none. Lucia disappeared to manage the household crisis. The guards maintained their post as if nothing had changed. The world kept turning, indifferent to her terror. It was near midnight when she heard footsteps in the hallway. Heavy. Familiar. Impossible. The library door opened. Adriano stood there, leaning heavily against the frame. His shirt was torn and blood-stained, a bandage wrapped around his head, already seeping red. His face was bruised, one eye swelling shut. But he was alive. Standing, looking at her with something raw and unguarded in his expression. "You're here," he said, voice rough. "I thought that they said you were in the library. I had to see—" Elena crossed the room before thought could stop her, reached him just as his legs buckled. She caught him as best she could, his weight nearly dragging them both down. "You shouldn't be here," she gasped, struggling to support him. "You should be in hospital. Left, against medical advice." Adriano's arm came around her shoulders, steadying himself. "Had to make sure. The estate. You. Had to—" "You're bleeding." Elena could feel it, warm and wet against her hands. "Adriano, you need a doctor. Now." "Already called. On the way." He looked down at her, and Elena saw fear in his eyes. Real fear. "The brakes failed. Someone tampered with them. Tried to kill me." "Who?" "Does it matter?" He swayed slightly. "All that mattered was getting home, making sure you were safe. That whoever tried to kill me hadn't sent someone here to—" He stopped, seeming to realize what he'd just admitted, that in the moments after a murder attempt, his thoughts had turned to her, to her safety, to protecting the woman he held prisoner. "The doctor," Elena said, pushing aside the emotional chaos his words created. "Where—" "Here." A man appeared with a medical bag. One of Adriano's people, clearly. He took in the scene, Adriano leaning on Elena, blood on both of them, and moved into professional mode. "Signore, you need to lie down, immediately." "The sitting room," Elena decided. "It's closer." Between them, they got Adriano to the couch. The doctor worked quickly, assessing injuries, cleaning wounds. Elena stood back, watching. She should leave, should return to her room and let Adriano's people handle this crisis that had nothing to do with her. But she couldn't move, couldn't stop watching him, cataloging every wince, every carefully controlled sign of pain. "Concussion," the doctor announced. 3 cracked ribs, multiple lacerations. "You're extraordinarily lucky, signore. If the car had hit at a different angle—" "But it didn't." Adriano's eye found Elena across the room. "I'm fine." "You're not fine," the doctor corrected. "You need rest, monitoring. Someone should stay with you tonight in case the concussion worsens." "Lucia can—" "I'll do it," Elena heard herself say. Both men turned to stare at her. She lifted her chin, defiant. "You came here to check on me. Fine. I'll return the favor. Someone should stay with you, and Lucia has enough to manage." The doctor looked between them, clearly sensing undercurrents he didn't understand. "As you wish. Wake him every 2 hours. If he becomes confused, unresponsive, or starts vomiting, call me immediately." He left instructions and departed, leaving Elena alone with Adriano. The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything unsaid. "You don't have to do this," Adriano said finally. "I know I have no right to ask." "You didn't ask. I offered." Elena moved closer, sat carefully on the edge of the couch. "And you're right. You have no right to ask me for anything, to expect my concern, to come here bleeding and broken and make me—" She stopped, unable to finish, unable to admit what he'd made her feel. "Make you what?" Adriano's good hand reached out, caught hers. "Elena, make you what?" "Care." The word escaped as barely a whisper. "You made me care whether you live or die. You bastard. You absolute bastard." Tears streamed down her face now, hot and unchecked. All the fear and fury and confusion of the past hours, the past months, pouring out. "I should hate you," Elena choked out. "You stole my life, my freedom, my future. You keep me prisoner for crimes I didn't commit. You're everything I should despise. But when Lucia said you might be dead, She couldn't continue, couldn't give voice to the terror that had seized her, the horrible certainty that if Adriano died, something essential would die with him. "I know." His hand tightened on hers. "I know, Elena. Because when that car lost control, when I knew I was going to crash, the only thought in my head was getting back to you, making sure you were safe. And I realized—" He pulled her closer, his good arm wrapping around her, drawing her against his chest despite the pain it must have caused. "I realized I don't know how to let you go," Adriano finished quietly. "This started as revenge, simple, clean, but you've made it complicated. made me complicated, and I don't know what to do with that. Elena felt herself breaking, all her careful walls crumbling. She'd fought so hard to stay separate, to maintain her identity apart from captivity. But in this moment, pressed against him, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong beneath her palm, she couldn't lie to herself anymore. Somewhere between hatred and understanding, between captivity and creation, between his brutal honesty and her desperate need for connection, she'd fallen. Not for the prison he'd built, not for the power he wielded, but for the man beneath all that, the one who read philosophy and questioned his choices, who'd given her his mother's studio and asked nothing in return, who'd driven himself from a hospital bed to make sure she was safe. "This is wrong," she whispered against his shoulder. "Everything about this is wrong." "I know." His lips brushed her temple, gentle despite everything. "But I can't seem to care anymore." They stayed like that as the storm raged outside. Two people who should never have mattered to each other, holding on like the world might end if they let go. Eventually, exhaustion claimed them both. Elena woke every 2 hours as instructed, checking Adriano's pupils, asking him questions to ensure coherence. Each time he woke easily, answered correctly, then pulled her back against him with an urgency that spoke to something deeper than medical necessity. Dawn broke gray and quiet. The storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean and strangely peaceful. Elena woke to find Adriano watching her, something vulnerable in his expression. "I need to tell you something," he said quietly, "about the accident, about what I learned." She waited, her heart suddenly racing. "It wasn't my enemies who tampered with the brakes," Adriano continued. "It was your father." The words hit like a physical blow. "What?" "We found evidence. Communications he had with a mechanic, payments made through shell accounts. Marco Moretti tried to kill me, Elena. And do you know why?" She couldn't speak, could barely breathe. "Because he found out I was keeping you here. Because despite abandoning you, despite using you, despite leaving you to pay for his crimes, some part of him still saw you as his." Adriano's hand cupped her face gently. "He's willing to kill me over you, but not willing to turn himself in to save you. That's who your father is." Elena pulled away, the betrayal cutting deeper than anything Adriano had done. Her father had known where she was, what was happening to her. And instead of surrendering himself, instead of trying to negotiate her freedom, he'd chosen murder, chosen to protect himself while leaving her in hell. "I'm sorry," Adriano said. "I know he's still your father. I know this hurts." "Don't." Elena stood on shaking legs. "Don't apologize for telling me the truth. Don't you dare show me kindness when she was already falling apart, when the last threads connecting her to her old life had just been severed, when the only person in the world who made sense anymore was the man who held her prisoner. Elena, I need to think. I need to..." She moved toward the door. "You should rest. Doctor's orders." "Will you come back?" The question held more vulnerability than she'd ever heard from him. Elena looked back at Adriano, bruised, broken, watching her with something achingly close to need in his eyes. "Yes," she whispered, "I'll come back." Because where else could she go? This beautiful, terrible cage had become the only home she had left. She didn't go back immediately. Instead, Elena fled to the studio, to the one place that felt like hers in this house of beautiful lies. Dawn light poured through the windows, painting everything gold and rose, indifferent to the chaos in her chest. Her father had tried to kill Adriano, had known where she was for weeks, maybe months, and chosen violence over surrender, chosen his own freedom over hers. Elena picked up a brush with trembling hands, loaded it with paint, crimson, the color of blood and rage and broken things. She attacked the canvas without thought, without plan, letting emotion guide every stroke. Red slashes across white, violent, chaotic. The visual representation of everything tearing apart inside her. She painted until her arms ached and tears dried salt-tight on her cheeks. Painted until the sun climbed high, and the canvas had transformed into something raw and terrible and honest. A woman shattering, pieces of her scattered across space, each fragment sharp enough to cut. "That's how you feel." Adriano's voice came from the doorway. Elena spun around. He stood there in fresh clothes, the bandage on his head smaller now, his face still bruised but cleaned of blood. He should have been resting. Instead, he'd come to find her. "You shouldn't be up," she said, unable to look at him directly. "Probably not." Adriano moved into the studio carefully, favoring his injured ribs. "But I woke up and you weren't there. I needed to make sure that I hadn't run, that I wasn't trying to escape while you were weakened." Bitterness flooded her voice. "Don't worry. I've learned my lesson. There's nowhere to run. Not from you, not from my father, not from any of this. That's not why I came." He stood before her painting, studying it with the same intense focus he'd given her work before. "I came because I was worried about you." "Don't." Elena set down the brush, hands shaking. "Don't pretend to care about me when this whole situation is built on you not caring, on you being willing to destroy me to get to him. Is that what you think I'm doing, destroying you? Aren't you?" She gestured at the painting. "That's what I am now. Broken pieces. Fragments of someone who used to have a life, a purpose, a future. You took all of that. My father's crimes gave you the excuse, but you made the choice. You're destroying me, Adriano, slowly, piece by piece, until there's nothing left but what?" He turned to face her fully. "What's left, Elena? Say it." "You." The word ripped out of her. "All that's left is you. This house. This life you've built around me like a cocoon I can't escape. You're destroying who I was and replacing her with someone who exists only in relation to you. Someone who paints your mother's studio and eats at your table and waits for you to come home and cares when you're hurt and She stopped, horror dawning at what she'd just admitted. Adriano closed the distance between them in 3 strides. His hands cupped her face, gentle despite the intensity in his eyes. "And what? Finish it." And falls for her captor like some broken, pathetic. He kissed her. Not gentle, not careful. A kiss that tasted like desperation and inevitability, like something that had been building for months and could no longer be denied. His mouth claimed hers with an urgency that stole her breath, demanded her response, gave her no room to pretend this wasn't exactly what part of her had been wanting. Elena kissed him back, hated herself for it even as her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer despite knowing this was wrong, was twisted, was the final surrender of everything she should have been protecting. They broke apart gasping. Adriano's forehead rested against hers, his breathing ragged. "This is insane," Elena whispered. "Yes." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "Completely insane. You're my jailer. I'm your prisoner. Nothing about this is right." "I know." He kissed her again, softer this time. Tender in a way that hurt worse than passion. "But I stopped being able to pretend I don't feel this. That you're just a tool for revenge. That keeping you here is only about your father. Then let me go." Elena pulled back, needing to see his face. "If you care about me at all, give me back my freedom. Prove this is more than just Stockholm Syndrome and twisted power dynamics." Pain flickered across Adriano's features. "I can't. Can't or won't. Both." He stepped away, creating distance that felt like abandonment. "If I let you go now, my enemies will see weakness. They'll test me, push boundaries. People will die, people under my protection, people who depend on me to be strong and uncompromising. I can't sacrifice them for me," Elena finished. "You can't sacrifice them for me, because I'm not worth the cost." "That's not what isn't it?" She laughed, the sound broken. "You just kissed me. Admitted you have feelings, but those feelings aren't strong enough to actually change anything. I'm still your prisoner, still trapped. The only difference is now you want me to be complicit in my own captivity, to call this love instead of imprisonment. And what would you call it?" Adriano's voice rose, frustration breaking through his control. "Because I don't know anymore. I don't know what this is, or how to fix it, or how to be the man who does the right thing when I've spent my entire life being the man who does the necessary thing instead. The right thing is letting me go. The right thing might get people killed." He ran a hand through his hair, wincing as the movement pulled his injuries. "You think this is simple, black and white. But my world doesn't work that way. Every choice has consequences. Every mercy shown becomes a vulnerability exploited. I let you go, and within a week, someone uses that perceived weakness to move against me. People die. Good people. People who've served my family loyally for years, and that blood is on my hands. So my freedom costs blood, and you've decided I'm not worth it. I've decided their lives matter too. Adriano's eyes burned into hers. I know that makes me a monster in your eyes. I know you'll never forgive me, but I won't sacrifice people who depend on me just to prove I care about you. Then you don't care enough. Elena turned away, unable to bear looking at him. You care just enough to feel guilty, just enough to want me to absolve you by accepting this twisted arrangement, but not enough to actually risk anything real. Silence filled the studio, heavy, suffocating. You're right, Adriano said finally, his voice hollow. I don't care enough. Or maybe I care too much about too many things and can't prioritize one over the others. Either way, you lose, and I'm sorry for that. Sorrier than you'll ever know. He left. Just walked out, leaving Elena alone with her painting and her rage and the taste of him still on her lips. She sank to the floor, back against the wall, and let the tears come. Great, wrenching sobs that shook her entire body, crying for everything lost, everything she'd never have, everything that had been stolen and everything she'd surrendered willingly. Because he was right, and that was the worst part. She understood the mathematics of his world, understood that mercy could be weaponized, that vulnerability invited attack. In the abstract, she even understood why he couldn't simply let her go. But understanding didn't make captivity hurt less, didn't make his kiss feel less like betrayal of himself, of her, of whatever fragile thing had been growing between them. Hours passed. The light changed, afternoon giving way to evening. Elena stayed on the floor, hollowed out, too exhausted for more tears. She heard footsteps eventually. Lucia appeared in the doorway with a tray. Miss Elena, you should eat something. I'm not hungry. Nevertheless, Lucia set down the tray, soup, bread, wine. Signor Val asked me to bring this. He's concerned. He has no right to be concerned. He's the reason I'm... Elena stopped. Lucia knew, had always known, but verbalizing it felt too raw. I'm fine. You're not fine, and he knows that. Lucia knelt beside her with surprising grace for a woman her age. I've known Signor Val since he was a boy, watched him grow from child to man to the formidable person he is now. I've never seen him like this, conflicted, uncertain. You've done that to him. I haven't done anything except be unlucky enough to have the wrong father. You've made him question himself, his choices, his certainty about right and wrong. Lucia's weathered hand covered Elena's. That terrifies him more than any enemy could, because certainty is what's kept him alive this long. Doubt gets people killed in his world. So I should what? Feel sorry for him? Accept this because it's hard for him too? Elena pulled her hand away. He's still the one with all the power. I'm still the one in the cage. Are you? Lucia stood, brushing off her skirt. Because from where I stand, you have more power over him than anyone in his life. You could destroy him with a word, Miss Elena, if you wanted to. What are you talking about? You could tell his enemies about his doubts, his weaknesses, the fact that he's compromised himself over you. You have access to his home, his routines, his vulnerabilities. If you truly wanted freedom, you could trade that information for your release. His enemies would be very interested in his growing attachment to you. Elena stared at her. Are you suggesting I betray him? I'm suggesting you have choices. More than you think. Lucia moved toward the door. The question is what kind of person you want to be when you make them. The kind who uses others' vulnerabilities against them, or the kind who sees the complexity in impossible situations and chooses mercy anyway. She left Elena with that thought and a tray of food growing cold. Could she do it? Could she reach out to whoever threatened Adriano, trade information about his weaknesses for her freedom? The idea was intoxicating. Finally having leverage, finally having power in a situation where she'd had none. But even as the thought formed, Elena knew she couldn't. Not because she feared consequences, but because, despite everything, she didn't want to destroy him. And that realization was more damning than any prison he could build. She was well and truly trapped now, not by locks and guards, but by her own traitorous heart that had learned to care for the man who held her captive. The next morning, Elena found a note slipped under her door. Adriano's handwriting, precise and elegant, even in haste. The East Garden gate will be unlocked tonight at midnight. No guards between there and the perimeter wall. A car will be waiting on the road outside with money, documents, and everything you need to start over. This is your choice, Elena. Stay because you want to, or go because you should, but choose freely. Choose for yourself. Not because of me or your father or anything except what you truly want. I'll accept whatever you decide. A. Elena read it 3 times, hands shaking. He was giving her freedom, actually genuinely giving her a way out. No tricks, no conditions. Just a clean escape if she wanted it. She should pack immediately. Should take this gift and run before he changed his mind. Should reclaim her life, her gallery, her future. Instead, she spent the day painting. A new canvas. This one deliberate, planned. She sketched first the outline of 2 figures facing each other across an impossible distance, built up layers of color, added detail and shadow and light. The painting took shape slowly. A man and a woman, separated by something invisible but absolute, reaching for each other but never quite touching. The space between them alive with tension, attraction and anger, understanding and impossibility. Elena painted through meals she didn't eat and light that changed from dawn to noon to dusk. Painted until the work was finished, until it said everything she couldn't speak aloud. By the time she set down her brush, night had fallen completely. 11:30 showed on the studio clock. In 30 minutes, the gate would unlock. Freedom waited just beyond the garden wall, her old life, or some version of it, ready to be reclaimed. Elena cleaned her brushes with steady hands, covered the painting, turned off the lights. Then she walked through the quiet house, down familiar corridors, to the library where she knew he'd be waiting. Adriano stood at the windows, his back to the door. He didn't turn when she entered. Probably didn't trust himself to face her. "The gate," Elena said quietly. "It's not unlocked yet." 11:59 precisely. His voice was carefully neutral. "I wanted to give you the full hour to decide, not force a rushed choice." That's almost considerate for a kidnapper. I was never very good at kidnapping. Apparently, I'm supposed to not develop feelings for my captive. He finally turned, and Elena saw the devastation in his eyes, the certainty that she would leave, that he deserved to lose her. But then I've never been very good at following rules that inconvenience me. Elena crossed the room slowly, stopped close enough to touch, but didn't. Not yet. "I could go," she said. "Take your money and your documents and disappear. Build a new life somewhere you'd never find me. Be free." Yes. The word sounded like it cost him everything. "Is that what you want? For me to go?" "I want—" Adriano stopped, started again. "I want you to be happy, even if that happiness doesn't include me, even if it means never seeing you again. You deserve freedom, Elena. You always did. I was wrong to keep you here, wrong to let my need for revenge override your right to live your own life. So this is atonement, penance for your sins. This is me trying to be better than I've been, trying to give you the choice I should have offered from the beginning." Elena studied his face, saw the truth there. He meant it, would let her walk away even though it destroyed him, would sacrifice his own wants for her freedom. The clock in the hallway began to chime, midnight. Somewhere in the east garden, a gate was unlocking, a path to freedom opening. Elena didn't move. "I saw my father once," she said quietly, "after Andrea died. Found him in his study, drunk, crying. He looked at me and said, 'Why did you survive? Why you instead of him?' I was 17 years old, and my own father wished I'd died instead." "Elena, let me finish." She stepped closer. "I've spent my entire life trying to earn love from people who couldn't give it, trying to be enough for my father, for myself, for some imaginary future where everything made sense. And I failed. Again and again. I failed. Built a life that turned out to be a lie. Loved people who used me. Trusted wrong." The chimes continued, midnight stretching on. "But then I ended up here, in this beautiful, terrible cage with a man who should have been my enemy, a man who held me prisoner but gave me his mother's studio, who talked to me like I mattered, who fought his own nature to try and be better." Elena reached out, cupped his bruised face in her hands. You were wrong to keep me here, wrong to use me for revenge, wrong about so many things. I know. But you were also honest. You never pretended this was anything other than what it was. You never lied about your nature or your choices, and when I called you on your cruelty, you acknowledged it instead of making excuses. Her thumb traced his cheekbone. You gave me truth when everyone else gave me beautiful lies. So you're staying. He said it like he couldn't quite believe it. I'm staying. Elena rose on her toes, kissed him softly. Not because I have to, not because you're holding me here, but because somewhere in these months of captivity, I fell in love with my jailer, and I'd rather have an honest prison with you than a dishonest freedom without you.
Oh, that's insane, Adriano whispered, even as his arms came around her, pulling her close. Completely insane, Elena agreed. But I'm tired of trying to be sane in an insane world. I'm tired of fighting what I feel. I'm tired of pretending I want to leave when all I really want is you. I don't deserve you. Probably not. But I'm choosing you anyway. She kissed him again, deeper this time. On one condition. Anything. Never lie to me. Never pretend this is anything other than what it is. If you're making choices that hurt me, admit it. If your world requires cruelty, own it. Give me truth, Adriano. That's all I ask. Truth, he repeated. Always. I swear it. They kissed like people starving, like prisoners granted reprieve, like two broken people who'd somehow found wholeness in each other's damage. The midnight chimes faded. The gate locked again, unwalked through. Elena had made her choice. Not freedom, not escape, but something more complex, more real. A conscious decision to stay with full knowledge of what that meant. Adriano lifted her easily despite his injuries, carried her from the library through corridors she knew by heart now. But instead of her room with its locked door, he took her to his, a space she'd never seen. Masculine and spare, furnished with the same expensive simplicity that defined the rest of the house, but personal in ways the public spaces weren't. Books on the nightstand, photographs on the desk, him and Dante as boys, their mother before illness stole her. I've never brought anyone here, Adriano said, setting her down carefully. This is mine, private, but I need you to know all of me, not just the parts I show the world. Elena understood. This was his vulnerability, his trust, letting her into the one space he kept for himself alone. She explored slowly while he watched, touched the books he was reading, more philosophy, poetry in 3 languages, a worn copy of something in Russian, found sketches tucked in a drawer. His work, she realized. Rough pencil drawings of buildings, of Rome's streets, of people. You draw, she said, surprised. Badly. My mother tried to teach me, but I never had her talent. He moved behind her, looking over her shoulder at his own work. She used to say art was about seeing the world clearly, understanding light and shadow, beauty and brutality. I think she was trying to teach me to see complexity, to understand that nothing is purely one thing. You see complexity now. I see you. His arms came around her waist, and you've made everything complicated in the best possible way. They made love slowly despite the urgency burning between them. Adriano worshipped her body with hands and mouth, learning every sound she made, every place that made her gasp. Elena traced his scars, old wounds from a life lived dangerously, and knew each one had a story she wanted to learn. When he finally pushed inside her, when they moved together with a desperate synchronicity that spoke to something deeper than physical connection, Elena felt something shift, the last walls crumbling, the final surrender to this impossible thing they'd built. She came apart in his arms, crying his name like a prayer or a curse, or both at once. Afterward, they lay tangled together, hearts gradually slowing. Adriano's fingers traced patterns on her shoulder, gentle and possessive at once. I love you, he said into the darkness. I know I have no right to. I know it's selfish and wrong and changes nothing about what I've done. But I love you, Elena. Completely. Impossibly. I know. She pressed a kiss to his chest. I love you too. Even though I shouldn't, even though this whole thing is built on foundations of pain and captivity, I love you anyway. We're terrible people, Adriano said, but she could hear the smile in his voice. Probably. But we're terrible together.
That has to count for something. They drifted towards sleep, wrapped in each other, the bedroom door unlocked for the first time in months. Because Elena wasn't a prisoner anymore. She was a woman who'd chosen to stay. And that choice, made freely, made consciously, made with full understanding of its complexity, transformed everything. The next morning, Elena woke to find Adriano already awake, watching her with something soft in his expression. "What?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. "I'm trying to memorize this, in case I wake up and discover it was all a dream." He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "You stayed. You actually stayed. Did you think I wouldn't?" "I didn't let myself hope. Hope felt too dangerous." He kissed her forehead. "But you're here. Real. Mine." "Yours," Elena agreed. "And you're mine. That's how this works now." "How what works?" "This relationship, this choice. If I'm choosing you, you're choosing me too, equally. No more power imbalances where you hold all the cards." Adriano propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at her. "You want equality. I want partnership. I want to know that when you make decisions that affect both of us, you'll talk to me. Hear me. Actually consider my perspective instead of just deciding what's best and expecting me to accept it." "That's fair," he seemed to be thinking. "What else?" "The locked doors stop. I stay because I want to, not because I have no choice. The guards become security, not jailers. And eventually, not now, but eventually, I want my life back. My gallery, my work, my identity beyond just being the woman you love." "Eventually," Adriano repeated, "when it's safe. When your father's been dealt with and his associates don't see you as leverage." "When it's safe," Elena agreed. "I'm not naive. I understand your world has dangers, but I won't be a bird in a cage forever, Adriano, even a cage I chose." "No." He pulled her close. "You won't. I promise you that. We'll figure out how to give you freedom and safety both. It might take time, but we'll find a way." Elena believed him. Maybe she was foolish to. Maybe this was still just a beautiful prison with better amenities. But looking into his eyes, feeling the sincerity in his voice, she chose to believe. Chose to trust the man who'd proven himself capable of growth and change and sacrifice. Chose love over fear. They spent the day in bed, talking and touching and learning each other in ways that went beyond physical. Adriano told her about his childhood, about watching his father build an empire on violence and trying to find ways to be powerful without being cruel. About his mother's slow decline and how art had been her refuge even when everything else was taken. Elena shared her own stories. The brother she'd lost and the father who'd blamed her for surviving. The dreams she'd abandoned for practicality. The gallery that had been both her pride and her prison. "I want to see it," Adriano said. "Your gallery. Everything you built before your father destroyed it. It's probably closed now, someone else occupying the space. Then we'll get it back." He said it with absolute certainty. "Whatever it takes, your work, your vision, it deserves to exist in the world. You can't just buy back my life. Watch me." But he smiled when he said it, taking the edge off the arrogance. "Let me do this for you, Elena. Let me help fix what I helped destroy by keeping you here." She wanted to argue, wanted to insist she didn't need his money or his power, but the truth was simpler and harder. She did need him, not because she was weak, but because he had resources she didn't, connections she couldn't access, and maybe learning to accept help was its own kind of strength. "Okay," she said finally, "but we do it together, equal partners. Your resources, my vision." "Equal partners," Adriano agreed, sealing it with a kiss. They emerged from his room that evening to find Lucia pretending she hadn't noticed anything changed. Dinner was laid out in the smaller dining room, intimate instead of formal, comfortable instead of performative. "I took the liberty," Lucia said primly, "of moving Miss Elena's belongings to the master suite. I assumed that would be acceptable." Elena felt her cheeks heat. Adriano just smiled. "Very acceptable. Thank you, Lucia." The housekeeper nodded, satisfied. "It's about time. I was beginning to think you'd both die of stubbornness before admitting what was obvious to everyone else." She left them alone. Elena and Adriano sat across from each other at the smaller table, and for the first time since she'd arrived,
Dinner felt like a choice instead of a performance. To new beginnings, Adriano said, raising his wine glass. To choosing each other, Elena countered, touching her glass to his. They drank, and she tasted freedom in the wine. Not the freedom of escape, but the freedom of choice, of agency, of building something real from the ashes of captivity. It wasn't the ending she'd imagined when she'd first been brought here. Wasn't the revenge story or the escape narrative or the simple rescue. It was something more complex, more honest, more real. It was love born from impossible circumstances, partnership forged in the fire of conflict, two damaged people choosing each other despite every reason not to. And somehow, improbably, it was enough. The first test came 3 weeks later. Elena woke to find Adriano's side of the bed empty, cold. She found him in his study, surrounded by men in dark suits speaking in rapid Italian. The conversation stopped when she appeared in the doorway. "I'm sorry," she said, starting to retreat. "I didn't mean to interrupt." "Stay." Adriano gestured her inside. "You should hear this anyway." The men exchanged glances. One of them, older, with silver hair and calculating eyes, spoke in English for her benefit. "Signore, this is family business. The woman doesn't need to—" "The woman is family now," Adriano interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. "Elena stays. Continue your report." The man's jaw tightened, but he obeyed. "We've located Marco Moretti. He's in Malta, living under an assumed name. Our sources confirmed his identity 2 days ago." Elena's breath caught. Her father. After months of silence, of absence, of abandonment, they'd found him. And? Adriano's hand found Elena's, pulling her to stand beside him. A united front. "He's vulnerable, unprotected. If we move quickly, we can extract him. Bring him back to Rome to face consequences for his actions." Which would mean what, exactly? Elena heard herself ask. All eyes turned to her. "What consequences are we discussing?" The silver-haired man looked to Adriano for permission. Adriano nodded. "In our world, Miss Moretti, theft of this magnitude typically results in death. Your father stole from us, destroyed reputations, attempted murder. The traditional response would be execution." "No." The word escaped before Elena could think. "You can't just— that's murder." "It's justice," the man corrected. "Justice by the rules your father understood when he chose to betray us." Elena turned to Adriano, searching his face. "Is that what you want? To kill him?" "What I want," Adriano said carefully, "is for you to tell me what you want. He's your father. Whatever we decide happens to him affects you, so you get a voice in this decision." The room went silent. Elena could feel the shock radiating from Adriano's men. This wasn't how their world worked. Decisions weren't made democratically. Women didn't have equal voices in matters of justice and revenge. But Adriano had promised her partnership, equal say, and he was honoring that promise even when it clearly made his associates uncomfortable. "I want to talk to him," Elena said finally, "before any decisions are made. I want to look him in the eye and ask him why. Why he used me. Why he abandoned me. Why he tried to kill Adriano instead of surrendering himself. I need to understand." "That could be dangerous," the silver-haired man objected. "He could have allies, could use a meeting to stage an ambush." "Then we control the circumstances," Adriano said. "Bring him here, to the estate, where we have every advantage and he has none." He looked at Elena. "You're sure? You don't have to see him if you don't want to." "I'm sure." Though her hands trembled. "I need closure, one way or another." Adriano dismissed his men with instructions to arrange the extraction. When they were alone, he pulled Elena into his arms. "You know this might not give you what you're hoping for," he said gently. "Your father isn't likely to suddenly become the parent you deserved. He might not even show remorse." "I know." Elena pressed her face against his chest. "But I need to try. Need to hear it from him. Otherwise, I'll always wonder if there was something I missed. Some explanation that would make it all make sense. There isn't. People like your father don't operate on logic that makes sense to people like you, but I understand needing to hear it anyway." 3 days later, Marco Moretti arrived at the estate in the back of an unmarked van, hands bound,
flanked by guards who looked ready to kill him at the slightest provocation. Elena watched from the library window as they brought him inside. Her father looked smaller than she remembered, older, gray streaking his dark hair, lines carved deep around his mouth. He walked with the careful dignity of a man trying to maintain composure in impossible circumstances. She felt nothing, no rush of daughterly love, no anger, just a hollow curiosity about this stranger who shared her DNA, but had never really been family. They brought him to the library, sat him in a chair with guards stationed at every exit. Adriano stood beside Elena, a silent presence of support. Marco Moretti looked at his daughter with something like surprise. "Elena, you're still here. Where else would I be?" The bitterness in her voice surprised her. "You certainly didn't give me any options." "I tried." Her father leaned forward, chains rattling. "I tried to get you out. The assassination attempt on Vale. That was supposed to free you. If he was dead, his organization would fracture. You could have escaped in the chaos. So you tried to commit murder to save me from captivity you caused." Elena laughed, the sound harsh. "How noble. Did it ever occur to you to simply turn yourself in? To surrender and negotiate my release? They would have killed me." "So you valued your life more than my freedom?" Not a question, a statement. Marco's expression hardened. "Of course I did. You're my daughter, Elena, but you're not my responsibility anymore. You're a grown woman. I gave you opportunities, capital for your gallery, introductions to the right people. What you did with those opportunities was your choice. What I did was unknowingly help you launder stolen money." Elena moved closer, needing him to see her, really see her. "You used my gallery, my reputation, my trust, turned me into an accomplice without my knowledge. And when it fell apart, you ran, left me to pay the price. You were always naive." Her father's tone carried dismissive contempt. "Too soft, too trusting, like your mother. I tried to teach you how the world really works, but you insisted on your art and your principles. This is what those principles get you, a prisoner in a crime lord's house." "I'm not a prisoner anymore," Elena said quietly. "I'm here by choice." Marco's eyes flicked to Adriano with understanding and disgust. "Ah, Stockholm Syndrome. How predictable. You've convinced yourself you love your captor, given him what he wants because it's easier than fighting. You don't get to judge my choices," Elena said, voice shaking with rage. "You lost that right when you abandoned me, when you chose yourself over your own daughter, when you tried to kill a man I love instead of facing consequences for your actions." "Love." Marco spat the word like a curse. "You loved the man who kidnapped you, the criminal who held you prisoner for months? Your mother was weak, but I didn't think you'd inherited her complete lack of self-preservation." "Don't!" Adriano's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Don't speak about Elena that way. Whatever you think of her choices, she's shown more courage and strength in these months than you've shown in your entire cowardly life." Marco laughed. Touching. The monster defending his pet. "Tell me, Vale, when did you decide to keep her? When did punishment transform into possession?" "When I realized she was innocent." Adriano's hand found Elena's, squeezed gently. "When I understood that punishing her for your crimes was its own kind of cruelty. When she made me question everything I thought I knew about justice and revenge." "So sentimental. Your father would be ashamed." "My father was a brutal man who died violently because he never learned that power without conscience eventually destroys itself." Adriano stepped forward. "I'm trying to be better than him, to build something that lasts instead of just taking what I can while I can. Your daughter taught me that." Marco looked between them, something ugly twisting his features. "How touching. But it changes nothing. You still want revenge, still want blood for what I took from you." Actually, Adriano said calmly, "what I want is for Elena to have peace, closure, whatever she needs to move forward with her life. If that means letting you walk away, I'll do it." Elena turned to him, shocked. "What?" "I told you. Equal partners. Your voice matters as much as mine." Adriano kept his eyes on Marco. "So tell me, Elena, what do you want done with your father?" The power of it stunned her. After months of captivity, of having no say in her own fate, Adriano was giving her complete authority over the man who'd caused all of this. She could demand his death, could make him pay the way she'd paid, could take the revenge that had started this entire nightmare. Elena looked at her father, really looked at him, saw a small, selfish man who'd spent his life taking from others without thought for consequences, who'd loved nothing except his own comfort and safety, who would die without ever understanding what he'd destroyed. Killing him wouldn't give her closure. It would just make her complicit in the cycle of violence that had brought her here. "Let him go," Elena said quietly. Marco's head snapped up. "What?" "You heard me. Let him go. Give him money to start over somewhere far from here. Make sure he understands that if he ever tries to contact me, if he ever comes back to Rome, if he ever speaks my name to anyone, the protection ends and your people find him." She met her father's eyes. "You wanted to abandon me? Fine. Consider it mutual. I'm done trying to earn love from someone incapable of giving it." "Elena," her father started to speak. "I'm not finished." Steel entered her voice. "You asked when Adriano decided to keep me. I'll tell you when I decided to stay. When I realized that this man, this crime lord, this person who should have been my enemy, gave me more honesty and respect in 3 months than you gave me in 28 years. He was wrong to kidnap me, wrong to hold me prisoner, but he acknowledged his wrongs, tried to grow, gave me choice when he could have just taken. You've never done any of that. You've never even tried." She turned away from him, unable to bear looking at him anymore. "Get him out of here. I don't want to see him again." The guards moved to comply. As they led Marco toward the door, he spoke one last time. "You're making a mistake, Elena, choosing a criminal over your own blood." "No," Elena said without turning around. "My only mistake was spending so long thinking blood mattered more than character. Goodbye, Father. I hope you find whatever you're looking for. But you won't find it with me." The door closed. Silence filled the library. Elena stood frozen, trembling with the aftermath of confrontation. Then Adriano's arms came around her and she collapsed against him, shaking with sobs that had nothing to do with grief and everything to do with release. "It's over," Adriano murmured against her hair. "You're free of him. Finally, completely free." "I chose you," Elena gasped between sobs. "Over my own father, over everything I was supposed to value. I chose you." "I know, and I will spend the rest of my life proving you made the right choice." They held each other while Elena cried herself dry, mourning not what she'd lost, but what she'd never really had. The father who'd existed only in her imagination, the love she'd craved but never received, but also feeling something else, liberation, the severing of chains she'd carried her whole life without realizing their weight. Days passed, then weeks. Elena threw herself into rebuilding her life with an intensity that surprised both of them. Adriano kept his promise, used his resources and connections to buy back her gallery space, reach out to the artists she'd represented, restore what had been destroyed. But Elena insisted on doing the actual work herself, choosing new pieces, curating exhibitions, rebuilding her reputation one careful decision at a time. "You don't have to do this," Adriano said one evening, finding her in the gallery space at midnight, still arranging lights and placements. "I could hire people. I want to do it myself," Elena interrupted. "This is mine, Adriano. My vision, my work. I love that you gave me the opportunity back, but the execution has to be mine or it doesn't mean anything." He understood, backed off, supported her in ways that mattered. Security for when she worked late, introductions to collectors, financial backing without creative interference. They learned to navigate his world together. Elena attended events on his arm, met his associates, learned the careful dance of power and politics that governed his life. Some of his colleagues clearly disapproved of her presence. A woman in their world was supposed to be decorative, not equal. But Adriano made his position clear. Disrespect Elena, and you disrespected him. Most learned quickly. A few didn't, and found themselves frozen out of opportunities they'd previously taken for granted. "You're reshaping your entire organization for me," Elena observed one night after a particularly tense dinner with business associates. "That's going to cost you. Let it." Adriano pulled her close. "I told you, I'm trying to build something different, something that lasts. That means changing the rules, showing that power doesn't have to mean cruelty, that strength and compassion can coexist." Your father would hate what you're becoming. Good. My father built an empire on fear. I want to build one on respect, on loyalty earned rather than demanded. You've shown me that's possible. The gallery reopened 6 months after Elena had been taken. The opening night was everything she'd dreamed, crowds of collectors and critics, artists whose work glowed under perfect lighting, sales that validated every choice she'd made. But the best part was Adriano standing beside her, proud and supportive, never taking credit for what was fundamentally her achievement. "You did this," he whispered during a quiet moment. "Built something beautiful from ashes. I'm in awe of you." Elena smiled, feeling truly happy for the first time in longer than she could remember. "We did this. Together. I couldn't have reclaimed any of it without you." "Partners," Adriano agreed, kissing her temple. "Equal partners." The first real fight came a year in. Adriano had made a business decision without consulting her, something involving territory disputes and violence Elena didn't fully understand until after the fact. When she found out that 2 men had died because of choices made in their home, she exploded. "You promised me honesty," she raged at him in their bedroom. "You promised me partnership, equal say. Then you go and make life or death decisions without even mentioning them to me?" "This was family business," Adriano countered, his own temper rising. "My world, my responsibility. I didn't want to burden you with it." "Burden me? I'm part of your life now, Adriano. That means the ugly parts too. You don't get to protect me from reality by hiding it." "I wasn't hiding it, I was handling it. Without me. Which means you still see me as separate from your real life, someone to be sheltered and managed instead of trusted as an equal." Adriano stopped pacing, really looked at her. "You're right." The admission surprised her enough that her anger faltered. "What?" "You're right. I've been compartmentalizing, keeping my work separate from our relationship because some part of me still thinks I need to protect you from who I really am." He moved closer. "But that's not partnership. That's just another form of control. I'm sorry." Elena studied his face, looking for sincerity. Found it. "Don't do it again. If we're building a life together, I need to know all of it, the beautiful and the brutal. I can handle it." "I know you can." Adriano cupped her face in his hands. "You're the strongest person I know. I'll do better, I promise." They made love that night with an urgency born from conflict and resolution, learning that they could fight and find their way back to each other. That disagreement didn't mean dissolution. That real partnership required constant work and honest communication and the willingness to admit when you were wrong. 2 years became 3. 3 became 5. Elena's gallery flourished. She became known not just as a curator, but as someone who discovered talent others missed. Artists whose careers she'd launched went on to international recognition. Critics praised her eye. Collectors trusted her judgment. Adriano transformed his organization slowly but steadily, moved more operations toward legitimate businesses, reduced violence where possible, earned reputation as someone who honored agreements and valued loyalty over fear. They bought a house in the city, smaller than the estate, cozier, a place that felt like theirs instead of his. Elena kept the studio at the estate, though, still painted there on weekends, still found peace in the space his mother had loved. On their 5th anniversary, Adriano proposed properly, not with assumption or demand, but with a question. They were in the estate gardens, the same gardens where Elena had once walked as a prisoner. Now she moved freely, by choice, staying because she wanted to, rather than because she had no alternative. "I know we're already committed," Adriano said, kneeling in the grass with a ring that had belonged to his mother. "I know we've built a life together, but I want to make it official. Want the world to know you chose me, and I chose you. Will you marry me, Elena?" Not because of circumstances or survival or Stockholm Syndrome, but because we love each other and want to build a future together? "Yes." No hesitation, no doubt. "Yes, I'll marry you." They married that fall in a small ceremony. Dante stood as Adriano's best man, whole and healed from the damage Elena's father had caused. A handful of close friends attended. The artists Elena represented, Lucia, who cried through the entire ceremony. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, silence filled the church. No one dared question Adriano Val's choice. But more than that, no one wanted to. They could all see that this was real, that whatever had started in darkness had transformed into something genuine. Elena wore white, not for purity, but for new beginnings, for the blank canvas they were creating together. "I promise to see you," Adriano said during his vows. "All of you, not just the parts that are convenient or comfortable, to honor your voice as equal to mine, to choose partnership over power, to love you not despite your strength but because of it." "I promise to be honest," Elena responded, "to call you on your failures and celebrate your growth, to build beauty alongside you even when circumstances are brutal, to choose you every day, consciously and freely, because you're worth choosing." They kissed as husband and wife, and Elena tasted freedom in it. Not the freedom of escape, but the freedom of choice, of agency, of creating their own story from ashes and impossibility. The first child came 2 years later, a daughter with Elena's dark eyes and Adriano's sharp features. They named her Andrea, after the brother Elena had lost. Adriano was terrified. Elena could see it in the way he held their daughter, carefully, as if she might break, as if his violent hands might somehow contaminate her innocence. "You won't hurt her," Elena assured him late one night while they took turns walking a colicky baby. "You're not your father. You're not the man who kidnapped me. You've grown, changed. Our daughter is lucky to have you." "I want to be worthy of her," Adriano whispered, looking down at Andrea's tiny face. "Want to give her the kind of childhood where she never questions whether she's loved, never doubts her value, never has to earn affection." "Then we will." Elena leaned against him. "Together, we'll break the cycles our parents created and build something better." They did. As Andrea grew, she was surrounded by love and art and honest communication. They never hid the complexity of their world from her, but they also never burdened her with adult problems. She knew her father worked in security and investments, knew her mother ran a famous gallery, knew they loved each other fiercely and fought fairly when they disagreed. A son followed 3 years later. They named him Marcus, reclaiming the name Elena's father had tainted with new associations. This Marcus would be kind, would understand that strength included compassion, would learn from his father's evolution rather than his grandfather's cruelty. The years passed in accumulated moments, gallery openings and business dinners, school plays and bedtime stories, arguments and reconciliations, growth and setbacks, and constant, conscious choosing of each other. When Andrea turned 16, she asked the question Elena had been waiting for. "How did you and Dad meet?" They were in the estate library, 3 generations now, as Adriano's mother's paintings hung on the walls alongside Elena's work and Andrea's own artistic attempts. Elena looked at Adriano. They'd agreed to tell the truth when asked, to honor their promise of honesty even when it was uncomfortable. "Your father kidnapped me," Elena said calmly, "held me prisoner to punish my father for crimes against his family." Andrea's eyes went wide. Marcus, at 13, looked between his parents with shock. "But you fell in love anyway?" Andrea asked, trying to understand. "Eventually," Adriano said, "after a lot of mistakes and growth and learning that revenge doesn't heal anything. Your mother taught me that, taught me to be better than the man I was." "So it's like a fairy tale," Marcus said. "Beauty and the Beast, but real." "No," Elena corrected gently. "Fairy tales are simple. This was complicated, messy, built on foundations that shouldn't have worked. But we chose to make it work, chose to transform something dark into something real and lasting." "Was it Stockholm Syndrome?" Andrea asked. She'd clearly been thinking about this. "Partly," Elena admitted. "At first, but then it became something more complex. I stayed the first time because I had no choice. But every day after, I chose to stay, chose your father, chose this life. With full knowledge and full agency, that's what makes it real." "Do you regret it?" Marcus asked. "That it started that way?" "I regret the pain," Elena said after a moment. "The months of captivity, the fear, the loss of freedom. But I don't regret where it led. Don't regret you or your sister or the life we've built. Sometimes beautiful things grow from terrible circumstances. That doesn't make the circumstances right, but it does make the beauty real." Adriano reached for her hand. "Your mother made me better, made me want to be better. That's the gift she gave me, the gift I try to honor every day by being the kind of father and husband she deserves.
The children absorbed this. Later, Elena would learn that Andrea researched Stockholm Syndrome extensively, trying to understand. That Marcus watched his parents more carefully, looking for signs of unhealthy dynamics. That both of them, in their own ways, worked to understand the complexity of a love built from captivity. But they also saw the truth, saw parents who communicated honestly, who fought fairly, who made decisions together as equals, who built a family on respect and trust rather than fear and control. 20 years after Elena had first been taken to the estate, she stood in that same library with Adriano beside her. Their children were grown now, Andrea running her own gallery in Paris, Marcus studying international law with plans to reform the justice system from within. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd walked through that gate?" Adriano asked quietly. "If you'd taken the freedom I offered instead of staying?" Elena considered. "Sometimes. I think about the woman I would have been, the life I would have built on my own. But then I look at what we created together, our children, our life, the ways we've both grown, and I can't regret my choice. Even knowing where it started? Especially knowing where it started." She turned to face him fully. "We began in darkness, in cruelty and captivity and pain, but every day after we chose the light, chose growth, chose to be better than our worst selves. That's the story I want our grandchildren to know. Not that love conquers all, but that people can choose to transform even the worst beginning into something worth keeping." Adriano pulled her close, this woman who'd taught him everything that mattered. "I love you. After 20 years, after everything we've survived and built together, I love you more than I thought possible." "I love you too." Elena pressed her forehead to his. "My captor, my partner, my choice." They stood there in the library where so much had begun and evolved, where Elena had first discovered Adriano's notes, his thoughts, the complexity beneath his cold exterior, where they'd fought and talked and learned to understand each other. Outside, the gardens glowed in late afternoon sun. The bars had been removed from Elena's old room years ago, transformed it into a guest suite. The gates stayed unlocked. The guards were security, not jailers. Everything had changed. Everything had transformed, because Elena had chosen to stay. And in staying, had given Adriano reason to become someone worth staying for. Their story didn't begin in purity or righteousness. It began in blood and revenge and fundamental wrongness. But every choice after, every conscious decision to choose partnership over power, love over control, growth over stagnation, had rewritten that beginning into something that mattered. They had taken darkness and created light, had taken captivity and created freedom, had taken revenge and created love. And that transformation, painful and complex and absolutely real, was their legacy. Not the crime that brought them together, but the choice that kept them together. Not the cage, but what they built inside it and beyond it. Not the beginning, but everything that came after. The story of two broken people who learned to heal each other, who chose love when hate would have been easier, who built something lasting from ruins. And in the end, that choice, repeated day after day, year after year, through joy and struggle and everything between, became there forever. Not a fairy tale, not simple, not pure, but real and true. And theirs. And that was enough.